Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming, guys. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching us on YouTube or on Rumble. I'm very happy to have Dr. Tuomas Malinen back on Syriana Analysis. He's an associate professor of economics, the CEO of GNS Economics, and expert on geopolitics. Dr. Tuomas, thank you so much for coming to the show again and dedicating your time for the audience.
Well, thanks for having me again.
It's great to have you. The other day you posted a comment, a very interesting one actually, under an original video that I posted about the conspiracy theory that some people spread about Iran and Israel, saying that they sleep in the same bed and they're allied under the table and they're conspiring against the population in the region. And this is something that have been pushed a lot among the Arab population. And your comment caught my attention, and you posted your article, basically the apocalypse, the article which was very terrifying when I read it. And I think I would like to start this conversation with you, first of all, with a tweet that you reposted on your account. And I'm just going to read this original tweet. You said, this question I've been asking since October 7 to this tweet. Major geopolitical escalations are in progress in Syria, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. More to come, possibly. The probability of an accident that can ignite a major war is a fast asymptotic to 1. The strange thing is that it appears this is what adversaries want. Why? And you're asking the same question yourself. Did you come to a plausible explanation that made sense to you, or within the information that we have at the current time in our hands, or you're still searching for an answer to why all of a sudden we have all this escalation, not only in Ukraine, but also in the Middle East?
Yeah, well, actually, this is a evidence.
$1 million question.
Yeah, evidence is kind of hard to find, but it just occurred to me that I did quite a lot actually of instrumental estimation while I was still in the academia, and the idea is that there is something hidden in the economy, let's say in some time series, and you use a instrumental variable that reflects that to get the effect for the estimation, statistical estimation. And this is actually what I have been doing with this topic. So I think in around August, it was that I started really to ponder this issue in July, August, maybe, because there was a researcher of conspiracies. We were talking, and at the end, he asked me, do I think that the Spectre in Bond movies, the group running everything, is just a production of fiction? And it kind of threw me off balance. I was like, well, I don't know. What's the answer? Okay, this is a long intro, but the point I'm making is that, first of all, to your comment about the conspiracy, I think the people are onto something, but it's not Israel and Iran who are conspiring. It's the people above this who are conspiring. I would say even that Israel and Iran, the current governments, are pawns in this game among all. And it seems that the aim is to push this escalation to a point where we have a major global conflict. And this may seem rather far-fetched for many, but just take a step back, really back, and start to look at these different things that has been happening since the COVID times, basically, as not an individual stupidity of politicians, but a place in a game that is leading us to somewhere. And then you get a whole new set of answers to these questions. But I think they point, if you apply, for example, Occam's razor principle, which is a philosophical principle, or principle of philosophy, which basically states that you want to find an answer, to find a explanation to a certain phenomenon, you want to find the factor that, or the path that has the least amount of factors in it. So because each time you add an additional factor, you add an error. So you need to find a path, let's say, which holds the least amount of assumptions. And with this, like in the political, now it seems that I explained everything, but it's just in political decision making, for example, there is nothing will go through the parliaments unless there is force strong enough to push them through.
Yes.
And ideally, this is the will of the people. You know, generally politicians want to get re-elected and they want to please their constituencies. But now if I look what has happened since the corona times, these actions taken by our governments have not been beneficial to us. So who is driving this? And then with the Occam's razor principle, you come to the conclusion that there is some force which is currently unseen pushing this. And this comes back also to your question, like I mentioned. So I think there's a very much bigger power play on top of actual governments going on in the Middle East. Or there are governments and then this force playing. That's how it looks.
There is something that is so blatant in this. The politicians or the officials challenging their own people, let's say, especially after Corona. I would argue that a decade or two ago, this was more tacit and it had more soft power and they were more manipulative and more persuasive and they were able to convince the people to get along and agree on certain ideas. But nowadays, we can see that there is tyrannical force being implemented in the discourse of forcing the people to get convinced about these things, or else you will be labeled and you will be smeared, you will be excluded from society. If you don't take the injection, then you are a grandma killer, you are a far-right fascist, this and that. If you disagree with an open-door policy with whoever comes, I mean, I'm myself a migrant, right, in Europe. I'm just saying, like, keeping the border completely open, it could also attract the bad apples, right? So there are certain things that I can see myself that previously it was the approach was softer, but it's now a little bit more aggressive. Is it because the politicians got emboldened, or the people have become more challenging to the government, so that the governments or these officials, let's say, are challenging their own people in a way that it costs them their career? Because nowadays, for example, in Germany, the ruling parties, the three ruling parties, they don't even form probably 35% of the consent of the German people, less than 30% actually. So how do you explain this?
Well, that's the interesting thing. During the corona times in Finland, this was spring, actually February 21, I was contacted by a high-ranking official of our health ministry, and he wanted to talk. And the message was that since the summer of 2020, the orders of how to handle corona, what kind of actions to take, started to come outside Finland. And this person even called that our then Prime Minister Sanna Marin needed to put in trial for high treason. Because if you take orders outside your country, in many places, especially in Finland, it's a high treason. So if you go back to that era when a lot of bad decisions were made, again, we come to the conclusion that who is really pushing this change all over the world, these decisions? Some argue that it's a stupidity, but no, I don't think that fits, because it's a global phenomenon. So we return to the question, who is pushing this? I'll close my phone. I noticed it was open.
No worries. No worries. It's really terrifying to listen to this, because myself, I notice similar patterns in different parts of the world, and I can see also an increase in the level of you call it stupidity, some call it incompetence, other people call it deliberate acts. I think Dr. Thomas's picture has been frozen. If you can hear us. Yeah, I think his picture is frozen. He will come back. It also terrifies me to see this in the context of two contexts, actually. The context of the globalists, let's say, agenda to enslave the general population, and nobody can argue against the will and the determination of the globalists and what they call them, the elites, in basically. Let me just remove him first. Yeah, and he will come back now. Yeah, in the context of enslaving the population, controlling their food chains, the body autonomy, and many other factors that directly concern us. For example, our wallets, our bank accounts, everything is being read nowadays, right? Like when you buy something and you pay it with your card, and you start receiving advertisements on your mobile, similar to the exact object that you bought, for example. So the data is being shared across the board on the internet, on social media platforms, to suggest to you some of these advertisements. So they're sucking the data. And some people argue that, yeah.
Yeah,
Hi,
hi.
doctor. No worries. I was just giving a commentary saying that this is terrifying in in two contexts. One
Mm,
is the context of the globalists, or what they call the elites, determination to enslave the population, and nobody can argue against that. That they want to enslave the population, controlling people's food chains, their wallets, pushing toward digital currencies, for example, and environmental hysteria, and many other agendas that is
mm,
under this umbrella. And the
mm,
second thing is more, let's say, a neocon approach that is to destabilize certain regions and cause wars. I still remember on the October 7, like I woke up to these events. I'm completely like shocked what's happening
mm,
and I want to see the details, etc. And I saw a tweet for David Icke. He says, this is going to lead into war between Iran and Israel.
mm,
This and
yeah,
the
mm,
cult wants a war between Israel. Like back then, Iran didn't even have a clue that the attack is going to happen
mm,
in the
mm,
Gaza Strip. And he said,
yeah,
"This is what the cult wants: a war between Israel and Iran." And watch. And I was like, no, Iran cannot go into this war. This is between Hamas and Israel,
yeah.
because Hamas and Iran had lots of disagreements in the past decade, especially
Mm,
Hamas's more affiliated policies with Qatar and Turkey against Iran. So they were not really in the best good terms, let's say. But now we can see where this has led to exactly. We
mm,
are almost on the brink of such a conflict. I would like to show you a few statements that I was reading today. The first one is coming from The Guardian. The Guardian says that the United States, Qatar, and Egypt say Gaza truce talks must resume with no excuses for further delay. And then Ursula von der Leyen jumps the wagon and she tweets saying, we need a ceasefire in Gaza now. That's the only way to save lives, restore hope for peace, and secure the return of hostages. Thus, I strongly support the efforts led by the United States, Egypt, and Qatar to help achieve the peace and stability the region needs. And finally, Emmanuel Macron, he tweeted again today saying that the war in Gaza must stop. This must be clear to everyone. It is crucial for the people of Gaza, for the hostages, and for the stability of the region, which is at stake today. Full support from France to the American, Egyptian, and Qatari mediators. I mean, these statements are coming when Iran is going to respond. Like we know, in the
yeah.
coming hours, Iran is going to respond. Do these statements indicate genuine fear of a catastrophic escalation in the Middle East after the potential Iranian retaliation? Because I saw the Jordanian foreign minister twice meeting with
Mm,
the foreign minister of Iran and
mm.
to deliver American message and an Israeli message. It seems that the Iranians are determined to respond. Do you think that the Iranians could respond in a way that could lead into catastrophic situation in the region?
Yeah, I think they could. It's just the preparations that they have been doing since, well, basically the assassinations have hinted to the possibility that they are actually preparing for a war. Like Russians bringing a lot of stuff there. It seems they are even said that India basically stated that they have given Iran the air defense systems and all this. And it is always been rumored that they would Iran would like to have the Sukhoi 35 fighter jets. Yeah, I think that was the plane. And all this. So the preparations for a wider war seems to be ongoing. But now, what is happening in the background, no one knows exactly. But what we do know from statements of the US that they are trying to prevent the full escalation there for several reasons, because the war in Middle East would be so destructive. But this is interesting. I actually hadn't seen those comments. They have some those tweets that somehow I missed them. But there is this possibility. Let's assume that, because this has been my feeling since the October attacks, that first of all, the White House didn't get the memo of the attacks. No one told them like there is going to be these attacks. I think CIA and the Mossad knew they would be coming, or worse. And then the White House reacted quite like in panic, send their troops there and all that. It started to supply Israel and all that. So it gave me a hint that what if there is this force, and it's mostly controlling the central intelligence agencies, most notably CIA, Mossad, maybe Shin Bet. And the governments are kind of forced to play along, but there's this struggle that, like, the US don't want this war now because it will collapse the economy. Europe doesn't want this war now because if LNG transports from Qatar to Strait of Hormuz, they stop, Europe will freeze, and every single European will understand how stupid the sanctions against Russia were. They were completely ineffective in all other means except deindustrializing Germany. So that's all they did. And again, coming to this hypothesis, what if there is a kind of a power struggle going between this group and political leaders? These calling the shots like these escalations, and political leaders trying to, keep it down. I don't know. This is something I've been pondering in the background. But what if the global power structure is kind of, there is a movement there. It's not stable anymore. It's going into the kind of this it's unstable somehow. So I don't know. This is just pure speculation, but
this is speculation.
Sorry.
I mean, you're putting the dots on the letters and the alphabet, and to be honest with you, there is something that makes sense for me, and especially with the aim to what they call the Great Reset. Let's restart the economy. Let's restart this and that. This project of presenting digital currencies and deleting all the debt. So how much was the debt of the United States? $35 trillion now.
Yeah, I think it's that one. Everyone can Google trillion. How many zeros there are? It's
seriously.
Insane number. It's an insane
I really
number.
want to check how much debt the US has, and the number is terrifying. To be honest with you, it's $35 trillion in February 2024. So all these numbers, it seems to me that this type of push for a conflict in the region could reset the global economy, right? In a way that they want to shape towards. So there are forces.
It would most likely, or with a very high likelihood, it would do just that, because the energy prices would go through the roof. Inflation would follow, central banks would need to raise rates again, and the whole system would collapse, like it almost did already on Monday with the carry trade from Japan unwinding. But one notion that people have been asking me, that why on earth would such a group, such a force, push for this global escalation, which could lead even to a nuclear war? I say that There likely to be two reasons. First is that the divide et impera, divide and conquer principle, applied globally, means that you absolutely devastate the fate of people on the systems and create absolute chaos. So you can establish a system. People become more what's the word? Well, anyway, submissive to such a proposition, which in normal times would never go through. And the second one is, I think this force or these people or this group is so omnipotent. They think they can control a nuclear conflict. When you add these two, everything starts to make sense. But the implications are very dire. For example, in Europe and in the Middle East, let's think what options NATO has left in Ukraine. Two. Either they quietly accept that Ukraine loses these areas and there is peace, or then there needs to be a cataclysmic event, basically drawing all NATO countries into the conflict, into Ukraine, and possibly to a war against Russia. What could such a cataclysmic event be?
Yeah,
I cannot think of anything else than a nuclear detonation in Europe. And the thing that everybody, I hope this is clear to everybody from henceforth, is that Russia has no need for such things, such atrocities. It's winning the war. It has been winning it for quite some time. So only one, if we assume that the NATO wants a war against Russia, for example, the only party here that would benefit from such an attack is NATO. And this directly implies that if we see such horror in Europe, it's not from Russia, but it's from NATO, and it's a false flag attack which they naturally blame Russia on. And yes, false flags, they have started wars since, I don't know, forever. They have been used in so many, like in Vietnam War, in our own war, where Russia shot in the village of Mainilan up north. They shot their own, was it grenade launchers or artillery, whatever, and then blamed Finns about it. And this started the winter war. And Finns didn't even have artillery so close that they could have shot the Russian side. So they have been using this, but now they need something truly cataclysmic. And as I'm not an expert in the Middle East in that sense, I don't know what could constitute as such a thing, such an escalation, such a cataclysmic event in Middle East, except, for example, well, nuclear detonation, of course. But is there any other you can think which could be so massive that it would force Iran or Israel to react very massively, effectively starting the war? What could be such an event? What do you think?
To be honest with you, if the Israelis in this case assassinate Haniya on the day of the election or the commemoration of the president of Iran, they could go even further, because remember, Qasem Soleimani was of higher importance for Iran than Ismail Haniyeh, who is the political bureau chief. But the idea of killing the guest in your home, this has a different connotation for the Islamic communities or for the Eastern culture. Like the wound here is, although Soleimani is of a higher status, but the wound here is bigger, because this time you also hurt their dignity by killing your guest inside your home. Of course, the retaliation is going to be on a different level. In this case, it will be calculated, but not like the last time, because even the last time, remember, the Americans were in touch with the Iranians through Oman, and they knew about the nature of the retaliation beforehand. Now the Americans do not know the nature. It's not even public, because if the Americans know, it will be in the press the second day. They will already leak it to the press, and it's not happening for now. So I would argue that the retaliation would be stronger this time, still calculated. But what will Israel do afterwards? That's the real question. That's the
Yeah,
real question.
yeah,
If they go this further and kill someone like Soleimani, because Israelis were partners in killing Soleimani, the last moment they just didn't participate physically, but the intelligence and the security work, military work was joint efforts, American and Israeli. If they kill the leader of the Islamic Revolution, for example, in
yeah,
Iran,
yeah.
that would be crossing completely the line. I mean, for the moment, I do not believe in my objective mind that the former president of Iran, Raisi, has just died in an helicopter accident. I
Mm,
genuinely do not believe that. And I
mm,
said, if the Israelis had any hand in this helicopter accident, the Iranians are not going to respond militarily and attack
mm.
Israel in this case. They would just swallow it, but they will change their nuclear doctrine.
Yeah,
And that
yeah.
is, I think, where Iran is heading towards. This is
What do
how I
you
see it.
think? There's actually I saw a tweet. I don't remember who wrote it, but it was some Iranian politician who had stated that Iran actually has nuclear capability already. What do you think?
That was a member of a parliament in Iran. I
Yeah.
think there are many such politicians in the Middle East who would like to show off to the press, saying that we already have it, this and that. But Iran developing a nuclear weapon is not developing a candy. I mean, everybody knows Iran's enrichment needs now. If they want to enrich it to 80%, they will need another 6 months, and then 1.5 years to assemble a weapon, to build a weapon. And they will need the assistance of Iran and China in this case. So this is going to be definitely in coordination. But do really the Russians and the Chinese want to share such a technology now with the Iranians? That's a real question, because they want to really stabilize the region. It's in their economic interests for the Middle
Is
East
it
to be stable.
is it is it Russia's? It is China's interest, but is it Russia's interest? Russia, I
Actually,
think.
yes.
Is it? I
You,
think I
yeah.
think if there would be a serious conflict, everybody would need to buy Russian gas and oil.
Yeah.
Sanctions would need to be lifted.
Yeah.
So
That's a good point.
I don't think that is what Russia is pushing for, but I don't think Kremlin is holding the brakes either too
Mm.
much. I think
I
they're
think
more concentrated on Ukraine, and then they're providing Iran what they want. I don't know. I haven't really thought that this through or ask any of my contacts or anything what is the situation, how they see it. But
yeah.
yeah,
There is definitely backdoor support from Russia to Iran and from Iran to Russia. But when it comes to the Middle East, you're correct on this. I mean, they are not part of the same axis. They are not part of the same alliance in the region. And two different, Syria and Iran have different, for example, interests in Syria.
mm,
And we
mm,
can see this coming all the time to the surface, and the negotiations between Iran and Assad, and Russia and Assad are always depending on the balance of power in Syria. And I think in the case of Israel, just this is my how I see that the Russians do not want an all-out war in the region, and they told
all right.
the Iranians in this case, and this was reported in the Iranian press, that the Russians asked for self-restraint in this case, like
Mm, mm,
retaliation, but calculated one, and not to
mm,
um, break hell in the region, because the Russians also have forces now in Syria,
mm,
and they've been asking this. This was 10 days ago. Putin called Assad before the assassination of Haniya 2 days earlier,
okay.
and he talked to Assad, and this was a surprise visit. And he told Assad basically that there is going to be escalation in the Middle East, and what's going to be the position of Syria if war erupts in Lebanon, because Syria and
Mm,
Hezbollah are strategic partners in this
mm,
case, and most of the weapons of Hezbollah are from Syria. So they wanted to know what's the position of Syria. So they had intelligence information that there is going to be escalation before the assassination of Haniya.
mm,
So this is also a signal that the Russians are watching very
yeah,
carefully. And
of
I would
course. Yeah.
argue there is also one thing. The Russians started flying hypersonic missiles over
Mm.
the Black Sea. And
No, I didn't
this
hear
is,
about that. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there is a 24 hours, 24/7 F-30, the MiG-35, I believe. They are
Mm,
carrying hypersonic missiles. and it's directed to the Mediterranean. You would ask yourself why it's directed to the Mediterranean, because the Americans have their warships now there.
Yeah. No, this is the same. Like, and then was the altitude test of the intercontinental ballistic missile on the eve of the Iranian attacks on Israel. So I think the point is that I think the support of Russia to Iran is very strong, but and they want peace there. I'm sure of that, but they are not. It's playing on theirs hand, while it's not playing at all at U.S. hands if something drastic happens in the region. That was my point. So, and I don't think Russia is really interested of getting the world fire going. I think this looks the opposite way. They are keeping back, but let's just see what the attack on the Kursk region brings, because Russia needs to react. And there was one interesting tweet from one of you who follow this development in Ukraine, and he or she wrote that, okay, this was a desperate attempt to derail the peace process. And if so, again, this could be the work of the force or the group over groups, giving orders and creating this kind of havoc, because it makes no sense in any angle, because that Zelensky was saying I think we need peace. U.S. was leaning towards that direction, and even European leaders, and Putin has been saying that for a while, that okay, we can have peace, but now it's on Russia's terms, and then suddenly this. So it is. This is I don't know how likely it is, but it's possible that there's power struggle now, a play going on between this force and the governments in Europe and in the Middle East.
Yeah. I would like to show a paragraph from your article, the Apocalypse Scenario Part 3. Guys, the link to this fascinating article is in the description below, and don't forget that the X account of Dr. Tuomas.
Listen, and also could you also show the quote from Woodrow Wilson from 1920? I think that's very descriptive. You former U.S. president saying this.
Yes, I will. Wilson. So this is this is what you're referring to.
Yeah.
So this was the former U.S. President Woodrow Wilson. He stated, this is in the 20s probably. He said some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacture are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it.
Yeah.
So this is coming like 100 years ago.
100 years ago.
Yeah, and you in the Horsemen of the Apocalypse paragraph, you say, if such a group over groups with a dark agenda exists, we could describe them as modern horsemen of the apocalypse. This is because they would most likely try to bring biblical plight upon us. Are we referring to here in what's happening in Palestine, Israel, when we speak about biblical plight?
Everything. Basically, there was this the four horsemen were the Antichrist, famine, war, and death. I think about that. War, famine, death. So I'm referring to those, and of course, what's happening in Palestine, well, it fits in the death part. So what I worry, one thing what I worry is that with all this killing everywhere, there may be a hidden purpose there, which is normalizing it. Like, I don't know how many children and people have been killed in Gaza. I don't know the actual numbers, but it must be horrific. And the media is presenting it that, okay, this is bad, but it's happening. And someone is even saying this needs to happen. So you basically groom the populace of the world to accept a horrific loss of life, normalizing it. And what I fear is that at some point we will see a nuclear attack or detonation. And the same thing will happen after that. People will accept in the kind of demoralized thinking that killing 100,000 people is fine, or tens of thousands. And this is, of course, the absolute worst case scenario. But once again, if you look at what is happening and how the world stands like idly by of what's happening in Gaza, for example, and do not give a nothing on the killing of Ukrainian men in the hundreds of thousands in Ukraine. Yes. And it's fine because it's for some cause. We have gone from the kind of the age of enlightenment to age of barbarism, or we are in the transformation in this. And it's basically last time this happened in Nazi Germany, when people accepted eventually at the end that, okay, we need to get rid of the Jews. So the same kind of sick thinking is being pushed upon us. And it's just, this all points to that there needs to be a dark, very, very dark agenda that is being pushed upon us by some powerful force, which is probably what the Woodrow Wilson hinted over 100 years ago.
You remember at the beginning of this conversation, I told you that there is something so blatant nowadays in front of our eyes, that the politicians harming their own people's interests, regardless of the next electoral results, for example. And in this case, it's also very, very blatant in our eyes, and not only the killing, but also the literature, the language that the officials in Israel are using. For example, the final solution for Gaza. I mean, how many people, when you tell them the final solution, wouldn't remember what the Nazis said? Like, why would are they using this exact language? It's just, this is on purpose, right?
Of course it's on purpose, but how can a Jewish person say that? I think it was the final solution term, was it 41? And it meant the beginning of the Holocaust, the mass killing of Jews. How can they use such a word? And once again, these are usually signals of something. And there was something that threw me off balance the other day. A friend of mine started to talk about the Paris Olympics, and I have watched like maybe an hour per day in the evening some sports, and that's it. But in the opening ceremony, at the end, I think there was he said that the Olympic light was lifted somewhere and it formed a mushroom cloud. I was like, okay, well, I haven't time to check that. But there is this conspiracy theory, and this I don't know where this holds or not, but that these people, whatever this group is, parades their power by showing them in these public things. Gatherings, and they are also forecasts, so they tell their followers or whatever that what will going to happen next. And today, before this actual interview, I started to think that I think that the balloon lives and goes down every single day, and then I started to calculate how many days are there in the Olympics. Do they try to signal I don't know, 60 nuclear detonation or what? You get into these really deep cycles when you start thinking about this, and some you have to just discard because they are leading you astray. But we have to, like, there is so many strange things going on that you have to, if you are honest to yourself and for seeking the truth, you have to ask these questions. And like, my background is in academia for a long time. I watched the X-Files as I was younger. It's a great series, and I've been wondering, could there be flying saucers and all that? But never in my life would have I believed, let's say just 5 years ago, that I would be having this kind of conversation publicly, live. But I'm completely unyielding empiricist. I go where the data leads, and this is where I'm now. And pray to God that I am wrong, like
I
literally, please. But
I
this is
share your prayers.
yeah, yeah. And this is like, and we do forecasting. We don't
Yeah.
have the luxury of having political opinions. We
Yeah.
need to understand what happens. And now we built the like economy scenarios, and in the background there's this apocalypse scenario forming, because we need to be prepare our customers for it. We have to inform them what can happen in the worst case, and this is the worst
Mhm.
case. I won't probably write this to our newsletter that the balloon in the Paris Olympics, maybe it counts the number of nuclear weapons. No, but
Yeah.
these are it's just when you get into this world, you do like empiricists too. You observe something and then you take it back to your theory and see whether it fits, and then you see what comes. So it's kind of a really strange academic research what I'm doing now
Yeah.
in a way. But this is the point here is that we should observe really closely what is happening around us in politics and in even in such games, to understand what is truly going on, who is truly running our governments on this world, because basically almost all the evidence points to the conclusion that it's not our governments, it's someone else.
And that's also why they are really, really motivated in ousting presidents and governments that are still sovereign in their own countries, trying to do coups and regime change wars, and anyone who has still holding his hands on the sovereign decision making. And I would like to just make a comment here. From what you said, you mentioned data that we have in our hands, and how you couldn't imagine 5 years ago to speak about these things, but there is data in your hands. I would also argue and add that we have something called objective reality, and we can see with our own eyes certain
Yeah.
changes happening there. After Corona, it has accelerated, for example, and myself, I can smell. I have this instinct of smelling BS, right? Especially when the entire MSM establishment just micro focusing on one
Yeah.
minor thing, and everyone is speaking the same script, like it's scripted, you know it.
Yeah.
um, you mentioned the Antichrist, for example, and what
Mm.
happened in the Olympics with the with the painting of the Last Supper. That
Mm.
was also a message sending. They're telling the people, like they're sending you a message,
This is the
replacing.
possibility. This is the possibility we have to ponder that this is really happening. But what I,
Mm,
for example, mean in the article is that there are attacks against Christianity, which is
yeah,
basically Christianity brought the values modern Europe was founded on. And all why they are attacking them, because because the values are of love and kindness and forgiveness and all that. But
yeah,
it's a great example. I just heard it like several days after the opening ceremony. I was just no, yeah, figures. That was
mhm,
my first original thought.
yeah.
But this is, yeah, there is these things, and when you start to see them, you cannot unsee them anymore, because they are so blatantly
Mhm.
visible. They are just
Yes,
there.
yes. Last weekend I was in Amsterdam. I had a family visitor to Europe, and I went to see him. I
Mm.
didn't know that it's the Pride weekend, and when I was in Amsterdam, it was the Pride weekend, and you can expect, I'm sure, how things would be there. And I have nothing
Yeah.
against them, against their sexual orientation or whatever
Mm.
they want, but the amount of money was spent on this street demo celebration, I would
Mm.
say, and the number of the flags that you can see in every inch and every corner of the streets, and
Mm.
compare it to how many national flags are there, it's like
Mm.
zero
Yeah.
compared to everywhere the LGBTQ plus
Yeah.
flags. And it just fascinated me, and I'm not their enemy in any way or
Mm.
shape. It just fascinated me that all these people think that this is just about love and nothing
Yeah.
else. It's just about love, and those are just really normal people, and they're good-hearted people. They're
Mm.
hardworking people. Their
Mm.
family is there, And they believe this is about love. This is just
Yeah.
about love. So if they can convince all these people about that all this movement is about love, they can convince the people about anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I understood what's behind the Pride movement when I tried it just about 2 months ago. I tried to explain the flag to a 9-year-old girl, and while I was starting the explanation, I understood that this is massive grooming operation, nothing else.
Yeah.
You cannot explain it without going into these things 9-year-olds need not to know. So, and what her sister, actually, who is a teenager, she explained that there's these, or she had heard, I don't know if it's true, but there's these like stripes, and then there's this triangle, and the triangle is those for who use animals. And this normalization of this makes absolutely zero sense for the benefit of general populace or the good for the society. This is utter decadence that they're pushing our societies through this. So this once again fits to the same thing. And there, when you start to observe these different massive things funded, like you said, with great amounts of money, and you ask why? What's the purpose here? And the answers are not pleasant.
Time will tell in this case, and this is why I think, just this is my opinion, I think Western European countries, Baltic countries also share some of these characteristics, are determined to push this agenda on their people, and this is their countries, their own people. I'm just a foreigner living here, and I'm not pushing against these things, but I don't think that I can raise children in this environment. This is what I'm trying to say. I think that my child is my child, and for a long time I was in the past 14 years, I become more agnostic after I studied in international relations, political science, philosophy, etc. in three different countries. And now I feel like it's either the age that I'm growing up a little bit, or it's more seeing with my own eyes what's happening in the world. And this motivates me to become more Christian now. And this is a conversation I had with my family and my wife. I say, my future children, I would like to baptize them. And I would like them to learn about Christianity, about the Christian values, just like I was born. I feel like I'm immune now against this type of indoctrination because of thanks to my Christian upbringing. And I would like to pass it to my family members. And I definitely don't want to raise them here. It's like, this is the place where you lose your children, and you cannot really. The upbringing will be in the hands of the kindergarten, anyways. Dr. Tuomas, this is a wonderful conversation with you today. I really appreciate that you dedicated your time to come to Syriana Analysis.
Thank you. I wouldn't use word wonderful, but I hope it was informative.
Actually, I'm the objective person here to judge that you really encourage brilliant conversation about these things, and it's mind provoking. People agree or disagree. This is completely something else. Just to provoke the mind to think about outside the box, and this is it, And this is why I encourage this type of conversation all the time.
Me too. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. The X account of Dr. Tuomas, his newsletter, and his Substack are in the description below, guys. You can hit him a follow. And also, if you're new, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel. 60% of the viewership on Syriana Analysis from non-subscribers. Imagine that. So you can hit the subscribe button, the like button. And if you like to support this independent work, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen. Patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And I will see you on Monday, 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. Peace be upon you, upon your families, and salam.